Hello, before y'all see this title and freak on me, I'm gonna give you a little bit of a disclaimer. I do believe in a divine force, but I do not believe that any one human being can compartmentalize it, comprehend it inside of their own brain, inside of their own singular being. Nor can a group of people compartmentalize it or really comprehend this force inside of group thought. Therefore, I do not believe any human or group of humans can tell any other human or any other group of humans this divine force's intention for the way we're supposed to live life on this planet, or bring about a system of rules and structure for anyone else to live their own life. And this is the basis of my spirituality. And this is why I consider spirituality and religion to be separate from each other. And I use both of those words loosely, but we do have to use words to identify what we're talking about. So when I talk about spirituality, is your own relationship with this divine force that is here, that enacts his will upon all life on earth. And when I talk about religion, I'm talking about a system of rules, laws, commandments, an established system that is telling people the way that they should go about relating to that divine force, good, bad, right, wrong, can do's and can't do's. These religious institutions, I believe, are set up today more or less to control and manipulate a population more than enlighten a population. These systems are set up by a state of power. They're not necessarily set up by the people, for the people, with the same intention that early people were using them for. What makes a religion so powerful is that it is still based upon the spiritual, esoteric teachings of these ancient civilizations that knew what they were personifying and embodying in their own humanity. Is basically a mass manipulation tactic with enough of those spiritual truths laced into it that it can pull at the minds and at the hearts of human beings. So that there's some truth embedded in there, tools to use your life, but ultimately the way it's packaged in these systems is set up for control on a mass scale. So with the disclaimer kind of out of the way, we're going to get into really the basis of the video being that it's all kind of astrology. So early astrology, how does it really start? As far back as people was carving on walls, putting ink to paper, making art, a lot of this art, a lot of these depictions was of the sun. And it's pretty simple to see why early civilizations, early groups and nomads, just early hunter-gatherers, societies all worshipped or idolized the sun. The sun brought every morning warmth, light, and protection from the cold, dark, predator-filled nights, kind of delivering them from the darkness. Along with the sun in our solar system, ancient people also learned to track the other stars in the cosmos. The mapping of the stars helped the earlier people establish the first sense of time and was able to predict the Earth's cycles and it established an early way for them to navigate geographically, to navigate the land. Along with the depiction of the sun and the constellations, the carvings and the drawings, these early civilizations, many of them separated all over the earth at the same time, made some form of the zodiac, zodiac wheel with the 12 houses, the 12 constellations. And the zodiac still set up our framework for how most people live our life today, being the 12 months and the 4 seasons. Early civilizations started using metaphors and personifications of the stars, the sun, and the moon within the 12 houses of the zodiac to identify what the seasons meant to them, what the times were going to bring, and to pass down a framework of the zodiac to future generations. With this personification of the zodiac, the personification of the sun, or God's son, became the light, the savior of life on earth. It's easy to see why people made the sun, the father of life on earth, kind of their God, right? So in the zodiac, you have the earth with the sun relative to the earth, moving throughout the 12 houses, split by the equinoxes into 4 seasons. With this, they told stories and personified it just to pass down that framework. And since we're talking about God, we mainly focusing on the personification of the sun. They personified all 12 constellations. People personified elements on earth. People personified the moon. But we're talking about God's son, right? This video, we're talking about God, so we're talking about the personification of the sun. The Egyptians were one of the earliest civilizations to really know what the sun meant to them and be able to personify it on this grand scale. The most popular personification of the sun in Egypt is Horus. That's where we get the term hour from. Each hour the sun, or we have 24, but every 12 hours to them, Horus would move through a different constellation. The story of Horus was one of the first personifications of light versus dark, or good versus evil, that we see depicted in history. Every morning, Horus would rise to defeat the darkness personified as Set. And every night, Set would rise again to defeat Horus and send him to the underworld. The sun would go underneath the earth in perspective to the Egyptians. And this is one of the first personifications of hell. The underworld. The sun is just moving underneath the earth relative to where we are. So with this being one of the earliest personifications, it establishes a pattern that you're gonna see in a lot of other personifications of the sun, or God's son. I'm gonna read off a couple things. Tell me if you recognize a pattern. Horus was born on December 25th, conceived of a virgin birth. He was adorned by 3 kings who were signaled by a star in the east of his birth. He taught at the age of 12, baptized at the age of 30, led into his ministry. He led 12 disciples performed miracles such as walking on water and healing the sick. And after his betrayal, he was crucified, died for 3 days, and eventually was resurrected. Sound familiar, don't it? And I ain't gonna just stop at Horus. You know, there's civilizations all over the earth before us that personified the sun and have these kind of similar themes to them, you know. Stay with me. We have Attis of Greece, born of a virgin on the 25th, was crucified, and was buried for 3 days before his resurrection. Krishna of India, born of a virgin, was signaled by a star in the east, performed miracles with disciples, and upon his death was resurrected. Dionysus of Greece, born of a virgin on the 25th, performed miracles with his disciples, King of Kings, Alpha and Omega, resurrected upon his death. Mithra of Persia, born of a virgin on December 25th, 12 disciples, performed miracles, dead for 3 days before he was resurrected. A sacred day of worship was on Sunday, the 7th day of the week. There's examples of this all throughout history. That's just a handful, but you kind of see the pattern, right? And then this kind of leads us to the big fish to fry, right? The big fish is Jesus Christ, born of a virgin on December 25th, announced by 3 kings, child teacher at 12, baptized at 30, had 12 disciples, performed miracles, walked on water, healed the sick. King of Kings, the Son of God, after being crucified by Judas, was buried 3 days and then resurrected. So why the pattern? If you've been following along to this point, you kind of see all this was based on astrology, based on the personification of astrology. So now we can tie it into what this means in the sun, the moon, and the stars. The birth sequence. The star in the east is a real star known as Sirius. On December 24th, Sirius aligns with the 3 brightest stars in Orion's belt, known as the 3 Kings. Sirius and the 3 Kings point to the exact location that the sun is going to rise on December 25th, or the winter solstice. Virgin Mary represents the astrological chart of Virgo, or Virgo the Virgin. This is why in astrology, if you know astrology, the sign for Virgo is the altered M with the little loop. And Mary is not the only Virgin Mother, just as Jesus isn't the only, personification of the sun. Adonis of Greece was born of Myra with the M, and Buddha was born of Maya, all tying back into Virgo the Virgin. I can't handle the truth. Virgo in astrology is referred to as the house of bread, this being due to the season of ancient farmers who used astrology would refer to it as their harvest season, the house of bread, the house of harvest. Bethlehem literally translates to the house of bread, translate to the house of Virgo, not a place on earth. So this is the birth sequence personified. Now we move into the resurrection. To understand the resurrection, you first gotta understand the solstices. Ancient people through the solstices from the summer to winter would see shorter days, colder temperatures. Towards the end, the death of crops and the death of life on earth, and the sun would have a lower and lower and lower peak in the sky throughout the day. This symbolized to the ancients the death of the sun in a personified way. After the winter solstice, when the sun reaches its lowest peak in the sky, there is a 3-day pause in which, relative to Earth, the sun doesn't move down or up. It stays at its lowest peak. This 3-day period, from the 22nd through the 24th, the sun sits directly under a constellation known as the Southern Cross, or the Crux, i.e., God's son died on a cross, will stay dead for 3 days until his birth on the 25th, when the sun, relative to the earth, moves up 1 degree in the sky, signaling the come of longer days and the resurrection of God's son. And you don't see the resurrection celebrated until the spring equinox, i.e. Easter, until the days are officially longer than the night, symbolizing the victory of light over dark, good over evil. So we got the virgin birth, we did the resurrection, and one of the easiest ones to comprehend is the 12 disciples. If you've been following the astrology theme, you can see it's the 12 zodiac houses. And 12 is a repeating number throughout the Bible. There was 12 tribes of Israel, there's 12 princes, 12 kings of Israel, 12 brothers of Joseph. It goes on and on. They personify it all throughout the text. So really, the Bible has more to do with astrology than anything else on the rules to live your life. Good, bad, right, wrong is really just a big old book about astrological teachings. Even the cross, as people see it, earliest in civilization, didn't represent Christianity, it didn't represent crucifixion, it represented the astrological wheel, the 4 equinoxes, with the circle being the sun's guide through the 12 houses. This is why you still see crosses on church with the cross with the circle going through it, symbol for the zodiac wheel. The most interesting thing that these religious, spiritual personifications talk about to me is the ages. And astrologically, the ages represent where the sun is going to be on the spring equinox every 2,200 years, roughly. So every 2,000 roughly years on the spring equinox, the sun is going to be in a different house. This is due to the earth on a diagonal axis. So it actually, compared to how the sun moves through the houses throughout the years, moves backwards because the earth is rotating that way on a horizontal axis. So it takes about 2,000 years for one of these ages to pass. For all 12 to go through, it takes about 26,000 years, or as the ancients referred to it as the great year. In the Bible and in these ancient texts, you get 3 of the ages recorded in history with the kind of prophecy of the age to come being the Age of Aquarius. That's why it's so interesting to me. The Age of Aquarius was astrologically sometime from December 2020 to March 2021. So the Bible talks about 3 different ages while foreshadowing a 4th age to come. When Moses in the Bible descends the mountain with the 10 commandments, he sees the people lost their faith or whatever, and they're worshiping a golden bull. This golden bull doesn't represent false idols. It doesn't represent sin. It represents the passing of the old age of Taurus into the age of the ram or Aries. And this is why Jews today still blow a ram's horn, I think, for like the Old Testament, but it represents the moving the age of Taurus into the age of Aries. Jesus Christ in the Bible represents the age of Pisces. In astrology, Pisces is depicted as the 2 fish. Jesus fed the 50,000 people with a loaf of bread and the 2 fish. Jesus, on his pilgrimage, befriended 2 fishermen. You see the fish symbolism all over the back of people's cars and shit when they talk about Jesus is still here, but they really just talking about the age of Pisces. So what's really interesting to me is the Age of Aquarius, which was foreshadowed in the Bible. In Luke 22:10, when Jesus' disciples are asking him where they're gonna have the next Passover when he's gone, he tells them that in the city they're going to follow a man bearing pitchers of water and to follow him into the house in which he's traveling. We know houses in astrology represent the different astrological constellations, and which astrological constellation is the water bearer? Aquarius. And this is just interesting to me because I'm here now in the age of Aquarius on the vernal equinox was in 2021 March. You know, it's interesting shit. And, you know, all these astrological personifications, representations don't only exist in the Bible. The Bible is just the most prevalent today in society, mainly from my belief because of fear. You know, there is like King James, I think, some fucking king in Europe decided he was gonna write his rendition of it, and he used it to control the people of the state, and that just is what it is. But these personifications and these depictions of the Bible are all over civilization for years and years before us. You know, I'm talking about Egypt being one of the earliest and one of the most clear-cut descriptions of the astrological personification. Most of the Bible and the story of Jesus was directly plagiarized from the story of Horus. The story of Horus includes baptism, afterlife, final judgment, virgin birth, resurrection, crucifixion, the Ark of the Covenant, circumcision, saviors, great floods, communion, Easter, Christmas, Passover, and many more of the ideals that you can get from the Bible. These Egyptian teachings long predate any biblical adaptation or writings of these astrological symbols. Way before they was talking about Jesus, they was talking about Horus, and it's the same story. So really, I guess the goal of this is to show people that these current adaptations of the story of Jesus, the story of Horus, Krishna, Adonis, it's all really the same thing, but how it's been set in place isn't for spiritual teaching, is more for control through fear. It's more for power over the people, not power for the people than anything. I think it's important for people to realize that, these stories are just metaphors to describe nature, to describe nature personified by man, so we can heal wounds caused by fear and shame passed down through generations of people, that was more meant to keep us as subjects and not really meant to strengthen our connection with that divine thing that's all around us, that is in nature, that we're an extension of. If you talk about any human being, about the actual nature of the sun relative to life on Earth, relative to the moon, and look at it for what it really is hard to argue its importance. We know we all need the sun. We know we all need the moon. We all need the stars in order to navigate the earth. And we all need Mother Earth in order to survive. You can argue all day about man and his morality, because that's completely subjective. When you turn the sun into a man and you, instead of becoming extension of nature, make nature an extension of your subjective self, that's when people can start killing each other over these stories and start telling people who's right and who's wrong. If we all just looking at a star, it's hard to argue what is a star and what is the moon and what does this look like and what does that look like, because we just talking about nature. You feel me? So it's important for man, for woman, for humans to know that the divine exists within them as well as outside of them, but it gets dangerous when we're turning the divine into ourselves rather than turning ourselves into an extension of the divine. Fucking out there information in this video. Hope it reaches you well. Hope I edited it in a way that's digestible. But yeah, peace, love. Get back to astrology. Goodbye, I love you.